To bewail one's lot is always despicable. It is always the outcome of weakness. Why do people complain? And why do people seem to derive some kind of pleasure from the act of complaining? Why does the simple act of blaming society, the world, or even yourself seem to blow off steam? These are questions that occupied Nietzsche, who sought to formulate a psychological framework to answer them. First, we're going to take a look at a paragraph from Twilight of the Idols, which gives us an incomplete but well-written answer. If the title of this video strikes you as provocative or sensational, rest assured that the contents of Twilight of the Idols are much worse. The quote at the start of the video is a good indication of this. Nietzsche investigates the psychological type of the complainer through the lens of two archetypes, the anarchist and the Christian. Don't take the word anarchist too literally, since Nietzsche uses the words anarchist and socialist interchangeably throughout this paragraph. He uses the terms as stand-ins for those who are at the bottom of the social order. In his own words, the anarchist as the mouthpiece of the decaying strata of society. When dealing with Twilight of the Idols, it's important to keep in mind that this work is simply a very radical work in nature, and that Nietzsche generally doesn't bother to be precise. He's looking to impart some philosophical concepts of his in little linguistic bombs. An entire chapter, for example, is entitled Maxims and Arrows, sometimes translated as Maxims and Missiles. This is one of the many indications that show us that Nietzsche is trying to hit us with short bursts of insight, and they leave little room for nuance. The many allusions to hammers in this work are another example. That's why we shouldn't let ourselves be bothered by the precise formulations in this work, but rather try to unravel the underlying thought behind the words. We can avail ourselves of other works, and we will look at the genealogy of morals for further clarification to flesh out the arguments in a more nuanced way. For now, we're dealing with Christians and anarchists, the archetypes of the complainer, at least in Nietzsche's view. Do you often find yourself complaining about region-locked content on streaming services? With Atlas VPN, the sponsor of this video, that's a thing of the past. You can finally watch Rick and Morty from anywhere in the world, or watch TV shows and movies in other languages to top up your language skills. Right now, they offer a huge discount. For $1.99 per month, you can get a 3-year subscription with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Try it by clicking the link in the description. Atlas VPN has other functionalities as well. Personally, I'm a big fan of the data breach tool that automatically alerts you if your data is found in a breach somewhere, which is of increasing concern to all of us as the world continues to digitize and bad actors are out to steal your data. Nietzsche advocated living dangerously, but he probably didn't want you to throw your data up for grabs. A VPN also protects your connection if you're using public Wi-Fi, and Atlas VPN works on all of your devices with a single subscription. Atlas VPN is currently running a huge discount where you can get a 3-year subscription for just $1.99 per month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Try it out by clicking the link in the description. Thank you again to Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video. Going back to Twilight of the Idols, we can explore the psychology of two types of complainers, the Christian and the anarchist. These are archetypical examples who serve as a stand-in for all other types of complainers. Nietzsche is fond of using this technique to criticize a behavior, an idea, or even an entire philosophy and view of life. Construct an archetype which has the essential qualities of the thing he wants to criticize, and then perform a psychological analysis of that type. So what are these essential qualities? Well, first of all, surely someone who complains must complain about something. The main difference between the anarchist/socialist and the Christian is the object of scorn. The anarchist blames others or society for his bad lot in life. The Christian hates himself. Whether one ascribes one's afflictions to others or to one's self, it is all the same. The socialist does the former. The Christian, for instance, does the latter. Yet, as Nietzsche says, even this distinction is not really all that important, because the underlying mechanism is identical. The need to complain stems from weakness. To bewail one's lot is always despicable. It is always the outcome of weakness. What function does complaining serve then? Like other forms of ressentiment, another such Nietzschean concept, the act of complaining temporarily gives people a rush of power. For a moment, you can allow yourself to feel superior. The anarchist temporarily exalts himself above society, and the Christian, by acknowledging his suffering, feels himself closer to God. In effect, it's a tiny dose of revenge, a quick hit of a feeling of fleeting superiority. It's all about will to power. His splendid indignation alone relieves him somewhat. It is a pleasure for all poor devils to grumble. It gives them a little intoxicating sensation of power. And intoxicating it is indeed. Nietzsche argues that this little rush of power can even have a pacifying effect. We are ready to endure our sufferings so long as we can freely complain about them. The act of complaining gives us the satisfaction we need, and we lose the ability or need to actually get to work and change the conditions under which we were complaining in the first place. The very act of complaining, the mere fact that one bewails one's lot, may lend such a charm to life that on that account alone one is ready to endure it. Even though Nietzsche doesn't explicitly mention this, the same psychological effect happens when we accidentally hurt ourselves. For example, when we step on a Lego brick or stub our toe, and we curse and we swear. Modern studies have repeatedly shown that this effect is real, that cursing really does help us cope with physical pain. Of course, the anarchist and the Christian are not complaining about an acute, painful physical event, but rather they are suffering under something more nebulous, the general condition of the material world. But the underlying effect is analogous. It simply feels good to complain, even if complaining does nothing to alter the cause of our suffering. But fundamentally though, going back to Nietzsche, complaining comes from weakness because it is in fact all the complainer can do. If he was in a position to alter his lot, he would do so. But as he lacks the means, or the will, he is stuck at merely expressing his rage rather than doing something about it. And this rage must be directed at something. And it's directed at those who are different from the weak, those who are in power, be it politically or materially. One casts one's afflictions and, under certain circumstances, even one's baseness, in the teeth of those who are different, as if their condition were an injustice, an iniquitous privilege. Since I am a blackguard, you ought to be one too. It is upon such reasoning that revolutions are based. In this way, this tiny psychological observation about the underlying reasons to complain leads back to the core of Nietzsche's philosophy, the struggle for power, the weak versus the strong, ressentiment and a desire for revenge, even if it's just an imaginary or temporary revenge. Arthur Schopenhauer claimed that all of his writings, no matter the subject, going from essays on the Latin language to Why We Look at Animals, all lead back to the core thought of his philosophy. He compared his writings to a cathedral, a giant building with many different entrances, but with one place in the center where everything leads to. By contrast, what you often hear about Nietzsche's writings is that he is all over the place, hopping from one theme to the next, seemingly without a guiding or unifying principle. And that may be the case, but as we dig deeper and try to reason a little bit beyond what Nietzsche wrote himself, in other words, when you read between the lines a bit, you'll find that Nietzsche too, in his very disparate and distinct aphorisms, always comes back to the same few concepts. This little paragraph of Twilight of the Idols started with a psychological sketch of the anarchist and the Christian, and why they like to complain, and thus, more broadly, why people in general like to complain. But in exploring this short piece of text, suddenly we find ourselves going from the very particular, the Christian and the anarchist in the 19th century, to the very general, namely the nature of revenge, the struggle for power and the desire for revenge. Revenge against the world and revenge against those whom we perceive as more powerful. We found a hidden door somewhere in a back alley, and now we suddenly find ourselves at the center of a cathedral. At the center of this psychological investigation, we find the Nietzschean concept of ressentiment. At the core of Nietzsche's worldview, we find the idea that the world is comprised of the weak and the strong. These two groups have different outcomes in life and different moralities, different modes of being, and different ways of life. Ressentiment is an emotional reaction of the weak, a psychological coping mechanism to deal with the reality that they are inferior to the strong and powerful. The pain that is caused by this position of inferiority is channeled towards an external scapegoat. An enemy must be created upon which the weak can vent their frustrations, someone who is to blame for their sad lot in life. Christianity, for Nietzsche, is the epitome of resentment and slave morality. In fact, he argues that the entire religion is born out of resentment, as a reaction to their conquest and persecution by the Roman Empire. The oppressed Christians couldn't beat the Romans with conventional means, and therefore they created an imaginary revenge for themselves. Sure, the Romans may be victorious in this world, the temporal, material world, but Christians will have the last laugh on the day of judgment. We dive deeper into this topic in our analyses of both the genealogy of morals and the Antichrist. Check out the description if you're interested. What concerns us in this video is the particular psychology at play which lays at the root of ressentiment. As Nietzsche writes in the genealogy of morals, every sufferer, in fact, searches instinctively for a cause of his suffering. To put it more exactly, a doer. To put it still more precisely, a sentient, responsible doer. In brief, something living, on which, either actually or in effigy, he can on any pretext vent his emotions. For the venting of emotions is the sufferer's greatest attempt at alleviation, that is to say, stupefaction, his mechanically desired narcotic against pain of any kind. It is in this phenomenon alone that is found, according to my judgment, the real physiological cause of resentment. There is suffering in the world. This is a fact of life. Some people suffer more than others. That is also true. Those who are of a weak constitution in particular fall victim to the necessity to assign blame to something, or rather someone, for their sufferings. In its most developed form, this someone who is to blame is God, but it can also be society. Going back to the passage of Twilight of the Idols with which we started this video, we can see how the Christian and the anarchist, although seemingly of different psychological makeup, actually are not so different after all. Both God and society serve as external scapegoats on which the weak can blame their lot. But what is the purpose of assigning blame? Nietzsche argues that it simply feels good, like a narcotic. It temporarily alleviates the pain of being weak. It's a little intoxicating taste of power, the only real power they might ever yield. The following quote is Nietzsche at his most eloquent. Ale sufferers have an awful resourcefulness and ingenuity in finding excuses for painful emotions. They even enjoy their jealousy, their broodings over base actions and apparent injuries. They burrow through the intestines of their past and present in search for obscure mysteries, wherein they will be at liberty to wallow in a torturing suspicion and get drunk on the venom of their own malice. They tear open the oldest wounds. They make themselves bleed from the scars which have long been healed. They make evildoers out of friends, wife, child, and everything which is dearest to them. I suffer. It must be somebody's fault. So thinks every sick sheep. So, having gone through all of this, you might wonder, what about the strong? The strong simply don't complain. The strong only affirm. The strong say yes to the world, yes to themselves, and yes to their own morality and their own mode of life. Every aristocratic morality springs from a triumphant affirmation of its own demands. This is contrasted with a slave morality, which says no. The slave morality says no from the very outset to what is outside itself, different from itself, and not itself. And this no is its creative deed. We could dig deeper into Nietzsche's philosophy now that we've breached this subject. We could talk about amor fati, for example, and the test for a life well lived proposed by Nietzsche's hypothetical demon, which leads into the doctrine of the eternal recurrence. But we'll save those subjects for another video. In fact, a video that will come out very soon will deal precisely with this latter subject. So consider subscribing to the channel if you don't want to miss it. We cover a lot of Nietzsche on the channel, along with Schopenhauer, and there's more on the way, including videos on other philosophers. The conclusion to all this talk about the strong and the weak leads us straight to the core of Nietzsche's philosophy. But one question which remains largely unanswered concerns the status of the strong. Are you born strong? Can you become strong? Does master morality even exist at all at this time? In the genealogy of morals, Nietzsche argues that with Christianity, the slave revolt in morals was completed. He seems to relegate the resurgence of master morality to some future time, exemplified in the Übermensch. But the Übermensch itself is a concept that is full of ambiguities. For example, can the Übermensch exist today? Or is it a future development? Is it meant as an aspirational idea or as an attainable reality? Are you simply born an Übermensch? Or do you become one? These questions are all up for debate, as Nietzsche is either silent, or contradictory, or vague on these matters. The truth is, Nietzsche never really finished his philosophy. He became mentally unstable as he was working on a project which sought to systematize his entire philosophy, or which would at least organize all of his thoughts. The project was never completed. It was a planned series of 4 books, of which only the first part, the Antichrist, was completed. As the texts are given to us, Nietzsche concerns himself much more with the psychology of the weak than with the psychology of the strong. The most pressing questions remain unanswered. The best we can hope for is to conceive of the strong as the antithesis of the weak. And if the weak like to complain, then the strong don't. The weak deny, they say no, so the strong say yes, they affirm. Nietzsche never completed his project, but he did leave us with a sort of mission statement, and we'll end the video with this and leave it up to the viewer to draw his or her own conclusions. I want more and more to perceive the necessary characters in things as the beautiful. I shall thus be one of those who beautify things. Amor fati, let that henceforth be my love. I do not want to wage war with the ugly. I do not want to accuse. I do not even want to accuse the accusers. Looking aside, let that be my sole negation. And all in all, to sum up, I wish to be at any time hereafter only a yes-sayer. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and comments for the algorithm are greatly appreciated as always. We also want to thank our patrons who are keeping the channel afloat. Remember that in the higher tiers you get access to a monthly exclusive video that isn't shown on YouTube. If you want to support the work we do on the channel, your pledge is greatly appreciated. If you want more Nietzsche, we recommend you check out our in-depth analysis of the genealogy of morals. It's probably our best video to date. A full hour dedicated to this one book. Alternatively, for a shorter hit, you can check out our analysis of Twilight of the Idols. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.